Please introduce yourself to the audience today. Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Case. I'm the CEO of the Startup America Partnership, and we're helping bring entrepreneurial communities all across the country together to step up America's startup game to the next level. And we help high growth companies grow faster by connecting them with the people around them that help drive that growth.
Well, this has been an initiative that's, what, 2 years old?
Yep, just 2 years old. In fact, my first official day was at South by in 2011.
That's phenomenal. And the momentum that's taken off with Startup America, it's really phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. We've got now almost 1,000 champions around the country who are building their own entrepreneurial communities. Here in Texas, there's a Startup Texas, there's a Startup Colorado, there's a Startup Tennessee. There's 32 places around the country that have gotten together, gotten real entrepreneurs together to lead the charge to build much stronger startup communities. And we're helping connect them all together to provide one of the, I think, the first national startup ecosystem in the world.
That's great. Tell us, what have you got some learnings out of this so far in the first couple of years? Things that were unexpected?
Yeah, I think that the not unexpected, but an observation that in some ways we should have been obvious, but that's usually the best insights, right? Are the ones that you back into. The power and the importance for a startup, particularly one that is not in a strong startup community, is the quality of the network around them. And that I found myself traveling around the country talking to entrepreneurs, and they would identify their challenges or their problems. And it almost always came down to them not knowing someone who could help them with that problem. And it was really down to people. Mm-hmm. So we've spent a lot of time trying to build mechanisms to bring these communities together and increase the level of connectedness within a community. So within a Nashville, for example, and then across the state of Tennessee between Nashville and Memphis and Chattanooga, those leaders are building those connection points, and Startup America is bringing a lot of ideas and capabilities into those places to help them achieve their goals and set that bar. So at the entrepreneur level, it's really about them having access to the resources around them, and those resources really come down to people, individual people who can help them. And you know this as a VC, right? Like, one of your great jobs, especially in your portfolio companies, is to be a hyper connector. And 85% of startups, high growth companies, don't get any VC money, so they don't have that access point. And if you're not basically in the coasts, you're oftentimes really restricted even to San Francisco, New York, and the Valley. You're not part of a natural startup community either. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to bring that infrastructure together so that those connection points, you're an entrepreneur, it's much easier for you to get access to a whole network of people who are like you.
Great. Now, as we think about new entrepreneurs, emerging entrepreneurs, and we think about specifically at the University of Texas, our entrepreneurship programs, right, have you got any advice for us of what we can do to help those students who are dead bent on becoming entrepreneurs? And in fact, what we're seeing is more of them are starting businesses while they're still finishing their degrees.
Well, finishing their degrees is a good idea, especially if they're in STEM. So the best advice I ever got from my dad was get an engineering degree. So the first piece that I've seen comes back to this connectedness challenge. Get the students off campus. So the best thing I could tell you to do is especially undergraduates, get them connected to the startups that are building their companies right now here in Austin. Mm-hmm. We partnered with the Startup Colorado team and the Startup Massachusetts team last summer to pilot something called Startup Summer. Mm-hmm. They raised a little bit of money, and they did summer internships at 25 startups. They put the slots together early in the year. They had students apply, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But they gave them paid internships, and it was like a 50-50 deal. So 50% of the internship was subsidized, and 50% the startup had to put up the cash for it. It was like total cost like $4,000 for each student for the summer. So a relatively modest amount of money. But what happened was we had 1,200 applications in both Massachusetts and Colorado for 25 spots. Wow. So there's a lot of demand for undergraduates to want to get involved in their local communities. I can tell you that their internship that summer was way different than anything else, because these companies are building their companies right now, right? It's not like a theoretical thing. It's like you need to go sell stuff, right? And that's a big deal. And those students that went back on campus and talked to their peers about how they spent their summer, way powerful to bring that, make it real and concrete. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of universities are doing is bringing people like me and you in to lecture or do something for an hour, and then we go away, and the students are like, oh, I learned 2 or 3 tips out of this. In my case, maybe 1. But the real value is deep immersion into the startup community that's there, and there's a powerful connection that can happen when that starts to buzz.
So we can take the students out to the community. Do we also need to bring the community into campus more?
I think so, although I will tell you, startups are suspicious of institutions of any kind, okay? I was given a hard time to a couple of the founders who were here because they're in suits, and I was like, oh, you make me nervous, okay? So there's something about being approachable and feeling like you gotta kind of let the entrepreneurs in the way they want to be let in.
Right.
I often give advice to entrepreneurs and entrepreneur communities who want to engage with universities, for example. I say, do not talk to the administration. Go to the students, get them fired up first, create sort of that demand in the place, because it's a lot easier for the administrators to say, wow, I got a lot of students who want to do something, as opposed to top down, which almost by definition the students are like, well, if it's coming from on high, I don't want to do it. So the students and the entrepreneurs are naturally married because they sort of also are all suspicious of institutions, so they connect up. Okay. So don't be so suspicious, would be my answer.
We've got a newly minted Longhorn Entrepreneurship Society that's come together from the students. We're finding the students are finding their own bodies and ways to come together.
Yeah.
Do you encourage that?
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think the more that those can be connected to the broader startup community that's around them, that's really important, because there's nothing worse than a bunch of students who have, frankly, no experiences themselves other than the ones they've had with each other to necessarily go off and try to start a company. It happens, but much more likely if you're bouncing up against a much wider range of people who are in the middle of starting their own companies. So get that intersection and get that interaction to be much more robust in whatever ways you need to do it.
I see one of the sessions you're running here today is kind of lean startup methodology, letting people entrepreneurs speak for 10 minutes, and then you've got great mentors giving them feedback. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So we partnered with Startup Weekend to roll out their program called Next. And it was designed by Steve Blank based on the work he's doing around and using the Lean Startup Launchpad in his book, The Startup Owner's Manual, coupled with Startup Weekend packaging it up. So it's normally a 4-week program, which is kind of deep immersion for a number of teams. We have 10 teams here now, where over the course of 4 or 5 weeks, they get together a couple of times a week in person. There's a lot of online curriculum that goes on, but it's all about taking the 2 or 3 people that want to think they're starting a company right now, they're not quite there yet, to get them to actually be creating an actual high growth business. Right. And what we're doing here, South by Southwest style, is a crash course. We have 10 teams. They kicked off last night for 2 hours a day for the next 3 days, and they're working on really building their companies while they're here at South by. And they get homework assignments, 24 hours. Most of them will try to touch 100 customers to validate their customer propositions and to test them out, literally running around here at South by Southwest.
That's phenomenal. Tell us, last question for you today. Where's Startup America going in the next 6 months, the next year? Where are you driving it?
So we're focusing all of our energy right now on helping to support and really connect the startup communities that are all around the country. There are fantastic startups and fantastic leaders everywhere in this country. It's not just in California, it's not just in New York, it's not just here in Austin, it's everywhere. There's great startup communities in Dallas and Houston and San Antonio. There's fantastic people all around the country. So most of those states are starting to set their bars now about what they want to do, led by the entrepreneurs themselves. So we're going to spend all of our energy and time helping to better connect them together within their communities, but also connect those communities up. And our ultimate goal is that if you're starting a company anywhere in the US, you find your tribe, find the people that are around you, and then be able to bridge to anywhere else in the country, any other startup community, get the resources and the relationships that you need for your company to be successful.
That's great. We're so very appreciative of all that you're doing for the US, not just for Austin and those other communities. It's going to make a big difference to the well-being and wealth of many individuals and our economy. Thanks, Scott.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks.